Hello and welcome to a very interesting talk session organized by D Y Patil University, and this is based on career guidance, and today's topic is psychology. So here we are honored and we are welcoming our distinguished expert in the field of psychology. She is Dr. Deepti Puranik. Ma'am is PhD in psychology and she is academically active since 2003. She is currently serving in NMIMS as assistant professor. She is the founder of Lighthouse Psychological Consultancy. She is the proud associate member of British and European Polygraph Association. Ma'am has worked over 2,000 forensic psychology cases, which involves polygraph, BEOS, necroanalysis, and she has served as the expert witness in highly sensitive cases. Ma'am is having skills like investigative interviewing, psychometric assessment, and also she is involved in corporate behavior training. She has been also featured in prominent media including BBC, Red FM, Nach Baliye as a polygraph expert and psychologist. So please join me and welcome incredibly accomplished Dr. Deepti Puranik to D Y Patil University. Welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
So we are beginning the session with our talk show. So first of all, ma'am, as we are talking about psychology, so my first question to you will be, why psychology as a career? Is there any inspiration or you thought it about before?
Okay, to talk about psychology as an inspiration obviously came from within. During my college times, obviously this is one field that we had hardly heard about.
Exactly.
So it was not something which was very common in those days. And that was one field that we heard from our professors as well, that it will help you understand your own self. So during my college times, obviously we had a lot of questions, curiosities to really get into things, and that's how my inspiration or journey began in the field of psychology.
Yes. Wonderful. Ma'am, so now as we can see, a lot of courses are evolving. Now we can see AI, ML, data science and all. So can we say that this field is evolving or not?
Certainly this field has been evolving. I mean, if you look at for almost last 2 decades, the growth in this field has been tremendous.
Okay.
I mean, the kind of pathways that we have seen, every probably 2 years there are new concepts, new career aspects which have come up. So there have been ample of growth which we have seen in last 2 decades. Specifically after COVID, the growth in the field of mental health itself had a very sharp kind of growth.
Okay. So although it is a very old course, we can say that now it is evolving. Student can choose it as a career.
Certainly. I mean, as a field, it's a field which is almost 10-12 decades old.
Yes.
But it has been always an evolving field. So every time you will learn something new. So there's nothing like you're learning old concepts again and again. So that's how you look at it.
And whatever you are saying, ma, is it only in India or abroad also?
No, in India as well as in abroad. I mean, in both, everywhere, globally. Initially, obviously, when you look at psychology, it was considered to be a very specific oriented field.
Okay.
Now you look at it as an interdisciplinary field.
Yes.
So you have its application in almost every field wherein a human being is involved.
Yes.
So that's how we look at interdisciplinary nature.
Okay. So from the perspective of a student who has joined us through Facebook Live, if someone is thinking to take psychology as a career, so is there any particular career path he has to choose? The streams or something? Or he can be from any of the stream?
See, generally, obviously, it is always helpful if students study psychology right from their, FYSY, because that is when they can learn a lot about the basics.
Okay.
But as such, you can learn about the field of psychology at any particular stage of your life.
Okay.
So we have students who start with the field even at their after completing their masters and all, they want to learn something new. So even at that time, they can always learn. So, but it always helpful if you learn from the start, because you are able to give lot more time as what you may have thought,
Okay. So, ma'am, if a student is from after 10+2 or in the +2, he is doing arts or commerce or science, is there any restriction he should choose or not the psychology as a subject?
No, actually initially there was, okay, but with the latest NEP and all, the eligibility criteria is same. I mean, whether it's arts, science, commerce, whichever background students, they are still eligible to take admission.
So as per the new NEP?
Yes, as per new NEP, so there have been lot of changes which have occurred in the educational system.
Considered as a multidisciplinary
Yes.
course. Okay. So we can accommodate it in our curriculum as a multidisciplinary course. Okay. And ma'am, one more question from the student side, I think. So if they are thinking to choose psychology as a career, is there any particular means the types of psychology they have to choose? Is there any specific name of the psychology, as you can say, clinical, the counseling psychology or something like that?
There are various subfields of psychology. Okay. So when they choose psychology, obviously in just as we look at science. Science itself has lot of subfields. So you have physics, you have chemistry, you have bio. In chemistry itself, you will have biochemistry, or you will have analytical, you will have instrument. So similarly, when you look at psychology, psychology itself has lot of subfields. Almost, there would be around 10, 15 or probably even more than that subfields that students can choose for. Obviously, these specializations and all come at a much later stage.
Yes.
But what students learn in a general course of psychology is how it's applied in all the fields. So that way we have various fields like clinical, counseling, industrial, we have social, we have forensic, we have health, we have sports. So
varieties are there.
Yes.
First they have to go for graduation and then they have to choose the specialization.
Yes.
Okay, as per their liking.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. This is about directly it is related to psychology questions. Let's come to some more questions on that. As you have already told that career path means the stream doesn't matter. Arts, science stream, from any stream they can be, but after joining psychology, is there any particular path they have to follow, ma'am? Means in the graduation field they have joined as a psychology, is there any particular field where they could go?
See, that would entirely depend on the interest that they have in areas.
Okay.
Like I told, there are so many subfields. So if a student is interested in working with individuals who have kind of disorders, then they would be, or they want to get into diagnostics. So then clinical would be a field that would be of their interest.
Yes.
If they want to, work with probably relationship issues, or they want to work with family disputes, or how the environment in a family affects a child. So in all these cases, what they can choose is the field of counseling. So wherein they are able to work with relationships or with family, with children.
Yes.
So that way. If they want to work in corporate setup, okay. So in corporate setup, there are a lot of factors like motivation, productivity, work-life balance. All these factors certainly impact the mental health of a individual who's working.
Yes.
So there's stress, there's anxiety management. So that's where someone who has taken the field of organizational or industrial psychology can work in the field.
Okay.
Apart from that, what we have observed lately is because of lack of motivation, there are a lot of accidents that takes place. Okay, it could be because of negligence, it could be because of careless behavior, it might be simply because I don't want to pay attention to it. So again, in these places, that's where the psychological help comes into picture. Now we have social psychology. So if you look at social psychology, social psychology looks at how society at large influences a person's personality as well. Okay, so how does a person get influenced by his peers, by probably the family members, by what is happening in media? So that's where social psychology would help. Apart from that, there are so many societal issues where we look at, So again, social psychology will look at the issues that are being cropped up in the society, and a psychologist can help in dealing with these issues, which can help in policy implementation at a larger stage. Then we have forensic psychology. So forensic psychology, obviously it's a very interesting field. So it helps us to understand motives behind a crime. But not just when we look at forensic, it's not just about motives behind the crime, but we also look at how probably in investigation. So how a psychologist can help the investigative agencies to kind of create profile of an offender. Similarly, they would also be later on, after the person is arrested, can help in the rehabilitation of the offender. Apart from that, when you look at law, there are so many cases for insanity defense. So that's where assessment in forensic setup will come into picture to understand how forensic can help, looking at whether the person can be held responsible for the crime that he has taken. Now, after forensic, we have sports psychology. So sports psychology is again very interesting field. So the players, especially when you look at so many sports players, and if you look at a match, and suppose how the dynamics of the field itself, not just the players but even the audience, the responses, how will that affect the motivation of the person? So that's where psychologist actually works with the sports player to help them, concentrate, focus, help them increase their motivation. There are so many injuries, so there are so many setbacks. So how does that help in fighting, resilience? So all those things, that's where again psychologists come in picture. Then we have
lot of
we have health. So health psychology, basically, especially after COVID. So there were a lot of studies which were done, and research indicated that most of the deaths were more, instead of physical ailments, it was mainly because of unable to deal with the anxiety that was being caused. So now that's where the realization of mind and body came into focus. So that's where health psychology will look at also, not just after COVID, but even it looks at life-threatening diseases, especially cancer survivors and all. So how do you provide them with like patient counseling and all? So that is again another field. Then we have lot of assessments. So psychological assessment tools which would be done at various levels. I mean, in all fields, obviously clinical, organizational, counseling, all the fields assessments are used. But psychologists not just uses assessment, they also develop these psychometric assessment tools which can be used in any field for that matter. Then we also have military psychology, we have aviation psychology. So I mean, you name it, and we have the application of it. And
So options are many actually. The student have to choose. I think students who have joined Facebook Live, they have to take a note. You have lot of options. You have to choose the career, and then you have to step forward. Okay, ma'am. Another thing in this internship, I think is that internship, the field work, is it there in psychology or is it mandatory in this field?
See, internship is mandatory in the field of psychology because what one needs to understand is psychology is an applied field.
Yes.
So I can't just read it and I'll understand it unless and until I work with someone who is going through issues or probably not even going through issues. Like I said, it could be only for well-being or it could be for motivation.
Yes.
But unless and until you have that opportunity to actually deal with someone, so that's where internship plays a very significant role because it will help them shape their own, personality, being more open because we are all we are all more biased towards certain things. Unless and until I work with it, I won't be able to get over the bias.
Correct.
So that's all.
So, ma'am, internship and fieldwork will be there in graduation or mostly in masters?
Masters, so it's mandatory only. Okay. So, but graduation also, I think, as per NEP now, they have the government has insisted that on-the-job training should be there even at the UG levels.
So, you can tell it as a practical-based course.
Yes.
Just like other courses.
Yes.
Okay. And ma'am, now students are very much into we have to do a job. So, if a student thinks after graduation he should directly jump into a job, is it okay or he should go to postgraduate?
See, that entirely depends from the students and what exactly they want to do. But if you want to practice as a psychologist, then master's course is mandatory. Okay. If you want to practice as a clinical psychologist, then the course which is recognized by RCI is a mandatory requirement. So that's exactly what is it that I want to practice at. Do I just want to take up a job? Students can always take a job. Even after doing their graduation, they will be still able to apply their knowledge in their workplace. But if they want to practice as a psychologist, use psychometric assessment tools or deal with cases, then obviously they will have to do their master's course.
Okay. So it can be called as a choice. They can choose it or not.
Yes.
Okay. So, thank you, ma'am, so far. So, now I will ask you few questions based on your experience. So, ma'am, as we know, psychology is the word which is generally connected to mental health. Generally, we coincide with mental health only. So, is there any common misconception in psychology?
Okay.
That you know?
The most common misconception in psychology is, as a psychologist, you can read my mind. Okay, that's the most common, misconception that people have, that if we just talk to them for a minute and we are able to understand what is going on in their mind, which is obviously a myth. It is not a fact. But yes, if you spend a lot of time, you observe, you analyze, you understand the history, you understand it in a holistic manner. Only after that, so after spending a lot of time, that's when we are able to analyze or come up with.
It's not a magic.
It's not magic. It has a lot of hard work.
Yes. And in your career, ma'am, tell me two things. First of all, which one is the most challenging part and which one is the most rewarding part in your career?
The challenging part is many times when the clients coming, they want shortcuts to their problems. Okay, so they think if I have come to a psychologist, you give me an advice that will help me solve my problem within seconds. Which is obviously not possible. And you realize that after time they don't come back to you because you have not been able to give them quick solution to their problem. And that becomes the most challenging part because somewhere, even though when you start with therapy or when you start with sessions, you do put down some ground rules that these are the ground rules you have to follow. There is no easy solution. It's ultimately as a psychologist, we are the facilitators. But unless and until the client doesn't take efforts, the change won't occur. So this is something that, is the most challenging part in the field of psychology from my experiences. When it comes to reward, like I'll give an example. When I was working at a very initial days, and we used to always self-doubt. Okay, see, I can't see any change. I can't see any
Okay.
change. I'm working on this client for almost 2-3 months, and but I don't see any change. And that's when we realize that even you can't change anyone, but even bringing 5% or 10% of change in an individual,
Yes.
looking forward for your sessions itself becomes a rewarding part.
Exactly.
So that's what. It took some time for realization, but the satisfaction that comes after working is something that is really
Yes. Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am, for this answer. And based on these answers, ma'am, now can you suggest the student, is there any particular skill they have to acquire through their studies when they are pursuing psychology?
See, there are ample of skills that obviously students will need to be, but one of the most important skill that I feel is where they have to be very observant.
Okay.
Because we tend to avoid observing things around us, what is happening around us.
Yes.
We are more focused on ourselves.
Yes.
But observation is something that always will, raise questions and also give answers to those questions.
Correct.
Apart from that, developing more analytical skills would obviously be more helpful.
Okay.
So these two I personally consider to be the most important skill for a psychologist. Apart from obviously there are a lot of other skills that the individual needs to have.
So, ma'am, personally, I need to ask one question from my side. Means if someone is going through psychological therapies, medicines are involved also, right?
Not in every case.
Okay.
In certain cases where suppose they have been diagnosed with certain disorders, then obviously they will have to undergo psychiatric treatment.
Okay.
So medicines can be prescribed only by a psychiatrist. It cannot be prescribed by a psychologist.
So let's come to our next segment, ma'am. So as we discussed already, ma'am, people are undergoing stress a lot, and these psychologists means they can help to manage their stress. So in case of students like anxiety, stress, can you explain a little bit more how they can, means if someone is pursuing psychology and later they can assist a student to manage their anxiety and stress?
See, one most important part that I learned, was becoming more self-aware.
Yes.
Becoming aware of what kind of emotions am I going through? How am I dealing with these emotions? Am I able to control these emotions? If I'm not able to control these emotions, is it in certain situations? So all these things take lot of introspection.
Okay.
So as a psychology student, we do need to do lot of introspection about our own behavior first.
Okay.
Only when I am able to understand myself better, that's when I will be able to help others deal with this stress.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also, every individual is a different person. So no two individuals can ever be same. So when two individuals are so different in every manner, the techniques that are going to be working are also going to be different.
Yes.
So we need to look at what works for a person and what doesn't work for a person. So according to that, you will have to, design.
Correct, ma'am. I can say now these kids and the students, they are that much into social media, it turns like an addiction. So later, as a psychologist, can you say that the psychologist can help them?
Certainly, like I said, there are so many fields which are coming up. One of the latest upcoming field is cyber psychology.
Cyber psychology, okay.
So cyber psychology looks at how social media influences individuals' behavior, leads to social media addiction.
Yes.
So, how do you deal with addiction? So, obviously, as a psychologist, how these, mere concepts of how number of likes will kind of increase your self-esteem or decrease the self-esteem. So, that's how it works on the brain. So, like we look at, neuropsych, cyber psychology,
it's a
social media.
subject is there.
Cyber psychology is a complete subject to study.
Okay.
But it mainly looks at, how social media impacts an individual's mental health. How do you deal with addiction? So initially we used to have issues with substance abuse addiction.
Yes,
Now we have social media addiction.
Yes.
So that's obviously, and we have seen cases which really at times needs to be given medication to bring in control.
Yes.
So it's a kind of dangerous
We are seeing
trend
cases on
which
that.
we have seen
Yes.
increasing number of cases
These
of addiction.
influencers and this cybercrime. It is a lot, and we have to manage it. And I really wonder if there is a subject for this, and we can control it.
Yes.
And ma'am, is there any growing demand in India or abroad for the mental health professionals, or I can say psychologists?
And demand is obviously
Always
lot.
it is there. Yeah.
It's there. In fact, as and when you are looking at, like I said, since we are dealing with human beings, psychology is the field which is continuously dealing with the issues, or even not just issues. I mean, we don't need to look at only the problems that are being faced by the individuals, but even in general terms, like, learning, memory, all these are basic core elements of psychology. So even when we talks about our cognition, our thought process, so obviously as a field of psychology, it will have always lot of demand. I mean,
okay. So could you suggest, ma'am, internationally, means there are some institutes student can opt for internationally? Is that there are many universities they can check?
Many, almost all universities, UK, US, Canada, Australia, Singapore, Germany, UK. So there are ample of universities abroad as well as in India which have lot of courses.
Yes.
So,
and ma'am, is there any particular exam they have to go through?
Yes, there will be. Every state or every country will have their own criteria that have to be set. So you have to give exams, and you will have to fill up their forms. So plus you need lot of recommendations also. So there will be always an entrance exam that students will have to prepare for, and they will have to give.
Okay. So most of my questions are answered, ma'am. So at the end, I would like to advise the students who is a little bit confused about whether he or she has to take psychology or not, how he or she will decide. From your side, an advice to all the students they have joined.
See, one thing obviously the students need to ask is, what is it that genuinely interests them? Do they like to understand behaviors? So someone who has lot of curiosity within to understand why people are behaving in a particular way, they can always choose the field of psychology. But like I said, psychology is also an interdisciplinary field. So these days we also see the subject of psychology in almost all the other fields as well. So even as a subject, so even when we talk about behavioral economics, so even that has a combination of psychology and economics. Then AI, so these days we have data into AI, where we are looking at behavioral analysis. So as such, I think it's a field which is open to almost everyone. But if they have to choose it as a main field, then they need to look whether they would like to work with people. I mean, that's the most strongest point, that I would love to work with people. So if you love working with people, then psychology is a field.
You have to listen to them, you have to observe them, then you will do studies. It is not written in the book, as I understood from this session. So ma'am, thank you so much for answering all my questions. I hope all the viewers and the students who have joined Facebook Live here, they have received their answers. And thank you so much, ma'am, for taking time and coming for the session. We'll be conducting more sessions for our career advancement, and we'll be giving guidance from D Y Patil University. Thank you so much, the audience. Thank you so much, ma'am. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.